We are now live. Hello, everybody all over the world. Today is our sixth lightsaber session by Chad Eisner. Hello, Eisner.
Hello, hello.
Hey, hey.
All right. Well, today we're going to go through some adjunct stuff, some fitness, some safety, that kind of thing, as we go through here, because it's something that comes up a whole lot. We discuss it a whole lot amongst people in TPLA. These are the kind of issues that we really kind of dwell in, is these training issues of how to go, bring somebody safely through a lot of stuff. And fitness is something that comes into a lot of this. One of our major pushes is, of course, to increase fitness in the general population by popularizing these sports, so that people can get into them. Lightsaber is starting to come into its own because we now have rule sets that we can use and we can apply to competition. So now people can take it up with some sort of goal in mind. But one of the major goals that almost everybody cites for getting into martial arts, for getting into fencing, for getting into any type of sword play or whatever, is fitness. Obviously, sword fighting is not really, is an anachronism now. It's not really something that is done, often. I'm fond of saying that the place that you have the highest risk of being run through with a sword is in a play, because we just don't use them anymore. That being said, when we pick up these types of tools, there are certain things that happen to our body, and there are certain ways that we have to move our body in order to keep everything working well. Whenever you're an athlete in any sport or whatever, fitness is a whole training component, right? It's its own thing. Now we'll keep everything very lightsaber focused here. And what I mean by that is we're going to be this will be stuff that's really applicable to really a lot of weapon arts out there. Let's talk about, first of all, the weapon here. So the weapon that we use, the LED saber, lightsaber, whatever you want to call it, is, as we've discussed before, it's a polycarbonate tube and an aluminum handle, and then you have the electronics in it. Now I can take the electronics out of this one right here. So this is basically the functional aspect of the saber. Now what that means is that these weapons are relatively light. So they're going to be lighter than, say, period swords or steel swords, if that is what you use. Now they're going to be heavier and have many, many different qualities than, say, fencing weapons like the sabers, foils, and epées and stuff like that. And that's because it's just more substantial. Now it's not so different that it causes any real problems. There may be little issues, and we'll talk about those today, as far as the fitness and the overuse injury and that kind of thing. With a lighter weapon, and these are this kind of rules of thumbs, with lighter weapons, you are more likely to move your joints in improper ways or load them improperly, because the loads are so small you don't necessarily notice them. Using heavier weapons may cause overuse injuries, kind of in the same way, but more as in, since it is too heavy, you may cheat through a particular range of motion that you don't want to do that with. So there are two major joints that we're going to kind of focus on, or I'm going to focus on: wrist and hip. Okay. Now these two come up a lot in sword play, in fencing, and all that. Now when I say hip, I'm just talking about the joints, the wrist and the hip. Talking about these two things, we are also going to be talking about elbow, shoulder, rotator cuff, you know, that, and then with the hip, quads, hamstrings, glutes, calf, ankle, right? These are all the types of things. So we're basically going to talk about a little bit about upper body mechanics and a little bit about lower. Now, with the lower, that will come in here. But with the upper, when we're talking about the weapon here, the things to think about is, since this is going to be balanced about out here for most things. If you have a regulation blade in there on the persuader, like here, turn that on a little bit so you can see. So this is the point of balance, okay? So when I'm holding it here, that's going to give me a certain amount of blade presence, right? Now, blade presence is something that I think is misunderstood a whole lot. Everybody's going to have their own idea of how much blade presence they like. And blade presence is essentially your ability to kind of feel and control the blade, right? But also it's going to feel like it wants to do something itself. So as the balance point moves out from your hand, it's going to want to do this more. So as the balance point goes out here, people are more likely to say something is tip heavy. Now you can have things that are too tip heavy. If you have too insubstantial a handle or something like that, yes, it can go out here. With the sabers, it's not so bad. We don't get too many really, really tip heavy sabers because most of the weight is going to be held in here anyway. That being said, it's going to have more blade presence and be tip heavier than, say, competition fencing weapons, right? And what that's going to do is that's going to cause inertia. So now I have to exert as much force to stop it as I did to get it to move, right? Now you may say, well, is that really equal? It is. You shouldn't use too much force to get this to move. And that's one of the good things about blade presence. If I like a balance point 4 to 6 inches up from my hand or from the guard, right? What that does is that gives, when I let go, when I just go loose, it starts the rotation, right? And then I don't have to use so much of my own force to move it, right? A mistake that a lot of people make is they try to bring the balance point down to their hand, right? What this will tend to do with these weapons, since they are more substantial, is they will increase the chance of overuse injury in the wrist, the elbow, right? And that's because you're going to have to use more force, more of your own power to get the thing moving. Because if I just hold it here and I just let it loose and the balance point is right at my hand, it's just going to balance right on my hand, right? Whereas if it's up here, when I let go, it starts to move down. So what I can do is I can use that weight. I can use the feeling of that to move this through, right? When I'm starting to do my orbits like this, I'm using almost no effort. It is a very, very relaxed motion. The effort that I'm using is essentially just kind of controlling where this is going, right? Tiny little movements in there. If I try to muscle through this and I try to push through this, again, I'm going to start getting pain in the wrist. I'm going to start getting pain in the elbow, right? Now, when you're practicing here, when you're practicing strikes, I will usually advise, if people are practicing by themselves, to, if you're practicing this, to hit a target, right? So a pel, a bag, something, some sort of contact, or to go through and finish things with a follow through strike. So I'm coming through here like this, and I come out here like this, okay? Whoa. So now, when I'm doing this, if I let if I follow through, I'm going to have much less force get stuck in my arm right here. Okay. If I'm constantly doing this, this will get tiring after a while. And again, it'll start, you know, that kind of thing there. So we want to keep that, you know, that idea pretty solid. Now, as far as how much the wrist bends here, right? We don't really want it to bend at all. It doesn't need to. I used to have a wrist brace that I could demonstrate with, you know, from spraining it or something like that. But when we're moving through here like this, the important bit that we want to do, like I said, this is very relaxed. I'm hardly putting any effort into this whatsoever. My arm is very, very relaxed. I don't hardly even feel this. And actually, if it's a heavier weapon, I can do that easier because I've got more stuff to go through. The trick is just kind of feeling that motion there. So yes, so the trick really is to move through the whole arm and not put that effort in the wrist, right? Because the wrist is not a great joint to do all of that with, right? It's designed for fine motor function, that kind of thing, right? And also, we don't want to let go of our saber like this, right? If we can hold on to our saber, right, like this, and we have about this much give, right, letting loose the fingers, everything still stays nice and tight, right? I can get that much movement, and I don't even have to move the wrist. I'm just squeezing my hand, right? And then there. So what I'm really trying to do is I'm trying to add up the amount of motion in each of the joints as I go through it, up through my center, right? There's a little bit of shoulder, there's a little bit of elbow, and when all of those come together, I get that, but it takes very, very little effort. So stability of the wrist is very, very important. Now, how can you train this? What is a good way to train this? Other than just using your weapon, right? There's a couple of tricks. Number one, the most common, the easiest, and of course the cheapest, is to do push-ups on your fists. All right. Now I'll go down here. Hopefully you can see here like this. So what you're going to do is, and if you don't have good, if I'm on, I don't know if you can see that. Don't quite have enough room here, but if push it down a little bit more. Excuse the Halloween. Getting ready. But anyway, so if your fists are not conditioned, right, you're not going to want to do this on bare concrete. Go on to a carpeted floor, put a yoga mat, something like that, or maybe we even wear a pair of gloves or something like that. So this also, if you're into barehanded techniques, this is also a way that we condition the tops of our hands. So what we're going to do is we're just going to put our fists on the ground like that, and we move it in through that. Now, again, it's hard to see, but I'm moving straight back like this. Go side to side here. So here, going down and up like that, okay? That keeps the wrist firm, and we're coming in here. Don't go too wide. We want to keep it kind of right in there. Right, so that's the first good way of doing it. If you do push-ups on your fists like that, it gives you good wrist control, all that. The other thing that you can do is they have push-up handles, which will allow you to hold on to something like that. Will have the same effect, but you won't actually have to go on top of your fists, right? Like I said, if you're into barehanded martial arts, go ahead. That's also going to help, you know, your punching and all of that. But we're just into the fencing thing, use that as a good wrist thing. Now, moving on to equipment. If you're going to do any type of wrist strengthening exercises, you don't really want to isolate this motion. There's no reason you need to strengthen the isolated motion in your wrist like this, right? If you want to do curls, right? If you're coming here, most of the time when your wrist is bending like this, it's meant to be relaxed and it's meant to be accommodating something, not necessarily pushing it through, right? We use our shoulder and our waist for that, okay? So, weights, if you get like dumbbells or something like that, those are okay, but there's not much you can do with them. You can kind of do this. I would not do these wrist curls with them. If you had, and I don't have a dumbbell with me, but I'll just use use my Saber here. If you open your hand and then close it, and you can let that roll in your hand, that's okay. But if you want the powerhouse, what you want to do is you want to get a hold of a kettlebell, okay? These are now very common. You can find them all over. Play It Again, Meijer, Kmart. Well, no, not any Kmart anymore. But those types of stores, Target, you know, that kind of thing. These are great because they are weighted like most of our objects that we use during the day. So there's many, many, many applications for this. We'll go through the stuff that is going to be specific for sword and fencing and stuff. So we are talking about the upper body here, the wrists and stuff like that. We'll get with this thing here to the lower body as well. But what I'm going to show you here first is ways that you can use the kettlebell to kind of firm up your wrist. So the first exercise that you see a lot of people do is a clean like this. Now, what I'm doing here, and I'll come up close, I am resisting the urge to let the bell pull it back like that. So I'm holding it up like this, keeping a nice straight wrist, okay? That alone is helping the whole thing. If I lift up, that's going to be getting the shoulder, and then I pull it back down in like that, right? But when you get good enough with this, there's another thing that you can do where we just balance the bell up, right? So I'll do that here. There, okay? So I'm holding this. This is a 16 kilo kettlebell, and I'm holding it up there with just with my wrist. Okay. Now, the nice thing about this is you will get to see how your grip is connected to your whole body just by doing that. Okay. So the bell on the end is creating a lot of lateral instability, right? So you're having to balance it. The handle is nice and thick, so you're really getting a lot of your hand, your forearm, shoulder, all of that. And what you'll feel is that start to radiate down into your core. And you'll want to keep a nice tight core here to do much of anything with that. Now, we could go into how that relates specifically to specific techniques, but we'll just leave it at that, right? And say connecting your arm and your core and your grip and all of this stuff is going to have benefits in whatever you do, whatever athletics you do, especially weapon-based arts or sports, right? Because that's our main connection to our weapon. Even if you're playing like a sport which has, you know, apparatus like tennis or baseball, hockey, right? You now have essentially like a weapon, a tool that you now have to transmit some of your biomechanical energy into to get things to happen. So there's that. The kettlebell is great because of the way that it's weighted and all of that, and because of the way that it's shaped. So as we use this more, this is something that I would really recommend anybody getting. You can keep it in the corner of a house. You can just bring it out whenever you want to. It's essentially the smallest, most portable home gym you can possibly find. So those are good exercises for like strengthening the wrists. Okay, we don't necessarily want to strengthen them this way, and to strengthen them this way, we don't necessarily want to resist that way, right? So we don't want to curl, you know, or do this. What we want to do is we want to allow our wrist to create a good isometric contraction so that it keeps itself stable. Now I'll show you another little exercise with the upper body for the kettlebell, because this is good for your shoulders and stuff. So if you have one, you hold it by the horns and you bring it up here to your chest. And then you're just going to roll it around your neck like that, okay? Now this helps your shoulders stay in line. You want to keep your shoulders away from your ears, so no shrugging, right? We just come up and go around, right? If you have problems getting it around, that probably means your shoulders are either shrugging, operating in some way that you're not quite aware of, or all that, okay? So a little rule of thumb is that the ear is shoulder poison, right? The closer the shoulder gets to the ear, the worse off it is, right? So we're constantly wanting to keep our scapula depressed, okay? Going down, kind of inward like this, okay? What I will often say is as you stand up straight, you want to try to slip your shoulder blades into your back pockets, right? And you keep that. By doing that, you also kind of extend the spine. Keeping all of those things in place, having the bell there allows you to do that. Now, the nice thing about it is it's just holding it in that position and attempting that movement will start to train that in your body. The straightening up, elongating of the neck, all of that. So we've got that. So that's the upper body thing here. Now, the upper body is entirely based on the lower body, okay? They've done research where they have had people train exclusively lower body stuff, and they saw that they would have upper body gains. When you did the reverse, upper body, you saw a little more modest gains in the upper body and no gains in the lower body. So the real message there is focus on the lower body. Your lower body, your legs, hips, all of that kind of stuff is far more critical to strengthen than stuff in your upper body. Your upper body, as you're doing the lower body stuff, tends to become involved in just the right way. Like we were talking about with the orbits here, we don't want a whole lot of effort happening in our arms, right? In our hands, in anything. We want to be relaxed. In Chinese martial art, there is a term called sung, and that's usually the term that's usually translated as relax. But sung is not it's a specific thing, right? Sung is a soft yet firm kind of idea. like an inflated ball, some tofu, you know, where it's soft, but it holds shape, right? This is the kind of state we want our body to be in this kind of relaxed yet ready state. Now, other research has been done by a guy named Stuart McGill in Waterloo, Canada, that shows that really high level athletes in whatever sport we're talking about, right, have the ability to do a full body contraction from being essentially completely relaxed, right, and then relax again. He calls this process super stiffness. That's an unfortunate term for it. I call it the McGill effect. But the main point is that when we exert force, we become rigid for a moment and then we relax. Okay. In our sport, well, let's take fencing, where that would happen as we're launching an attack, right? So there's a boom, a kind of explosive contraction throughout the entire body, which sends us in motion, right? And then at the very end, now, depending on what type of sport you're playing, you can either run through that force and let it run out, or you have to stop it, right? So if you come in and you stop and your body is doing work to do that, right? Now, the upper body, as we said, is based on the lower body. How is it based on the lower body? Through the hip, specifically through the hip. Now, everything that we talk about with core strength and core activation and core this and core that is really relating to this part of the body, from just below your rib cage to just above your, or just below the beginning of your thigh. Pardon me, a little dusty down here. So I usually say, like, you think about shorts, you know, and then maybe a cummerbund, right? So your core is pretty much all of this stuff. Now, this includes your back muscles, your glutes, right? Your inner thigh, right? We've got psoas and we've got orbita obliques and all of this stuff in here. All of this stuff is your core, right? And your core's one purpose in biomechanics is to allow you to remain upright and use your hands, okay? So everything above your waist is essentially sitting on top of your core. And then this is where most of the effort, most of the force, most of the contraction is going to come. And then we're going to have that kind of wave out to our extremities, right? Now, when we're doing these extensions, like if in your lunge, when you explode out and you reach forward, this expansion that's happening and everything like that should be very relaxed. We train over and over and over again these things so that when we do them, that motor pattern is very, very set in our body and we can do it. And the better that motor pattern is set, the easier it is, the less effort it takes us. So there you go. This is going to be a caveat for people who are trying to lose weight. As you get better at martial arts and all these things, you tend to use less energy. So yeah, a lot of times we have to artificially put other things in there. Fitness is a great way to do that. Okay, so let's talk about the lower body. How is the lower body attached and connected to the hands and upper body? Well, number one, if you want to talk about a structure, you have a muscle called your latissimus dorsi, which are these things here. You know, cover most of your back up here, and they essentially connect your shoulder down to your pelvis. Okay, so there's a structure where, as I'm moving through here, is connected. Now, to show how that is connected, I will do a little demonstration here of a squat. A squat is a particular lower body maneuver. We have a squat and we have a lift. The squat, we're bringing our center down right between our feet. Our knees go forward as far as our hips go back. So they will move out from a central point at the same rate and then return to it. Okay. Now that is like that. Okay. There's obviously, we're going to talk about this. There's an incline in the upper body, right? You can see that more if I hold this above my head and come down there. You see my hips go back, my knees go forward, and I come down. We talked about this a little bit. Some people say do not let your knees go beyond your toes. That is not an important distinction. Your knees will constantly go beyond their toes. What you want to make sure is that your knee, your bottom leg, your lower leg, and your torso are at about the same angle so that the force is being borne in your hip and not in your knee. So again, down like this. Now, if you try this and you haven't done this a lot, what will happen with a lot of people is as they go down, this will move forward and then will come up. And that's because your lats are involved in that squat. So as you go down, they're getting stretched out or pulled, and if they're not strong enough, they're not going to be able to hold that position. Whereas if they are, and I shouldn't say strong enough, if they're patterned correctly. So if I'm here like this, you see my arms pretty much stay kind of right there. Okay. Now we also have a lift. A lift is the other strategy that happens with our lower body, where our knees stay right where they are and only our hips move back like this. Okay. Now, again, something that is told to a lot of people, people say, lift with the legs, not with the back. And what they try to do is they try to go down into a squat and they try to pick up something like this. However, that is lifting with the back. Lifting with the legs means lifting with the back of the legs, your hamstrings. I will use one of my little boxes here to demonstrate. If I take my little box of horror here. Now, I want to pick up this box, right, of decorations so that I can make my house look cool. Okay. So how do I bring it from here to here? Right. Now, the correct way is how everybody will probably tell you not to do it. Right. The correct way is to bend forward like this. Put your hands on it and then just move your hips forward. Okay. The important thing here is that you don't bend from the back. So you don't do this. Okay. You're going to bend from the hip. So you push your butt back like that and bring up. And again, your knees do not go forward. If, however, you do it, and this is even in the OSHA book, so it's not like there isn't a reason why people think this way. This misinformation has been spread far and wide. Anyway, if I go down and pick it up in the OSHA way, like this, okay? Now look at where the weight is. It's way out in front. So if I just stood up, it's essentially like this, holding it out like this. Now, you go ahead and try that with anything. See which way is heavier, right? If I'm here like this and I do a proper lift, I'm just doing that, okay? I'm not pulling with my back. I'm not pulling with my arms. I'm just pulling with my hamstrings and my glutes, right? What my back and arms are doing is they're staying in position, just like I was doing with that kettlebell and I was holding it. The core fights the forces that are trying to bend it and move it, right? And that's what we're looking for. So this is your lift. This is lifting something off of the ground, going down back like that. Now, how can you see if you're doing it correctly with your back? Because if you do it incorrectly, you can seriously hurt your back. If you have your weapon, your saber, right? Even if you just have a broomstick or something, okay? I'll turn around so you can see it, okay? You're gonna take this, and you're gonna take the back of your hand and put it in the small of your back. Have it touch the back of your shoulder, between your shoulder blades and the back of your head. And then when you go forward, make sure all of those, the tailbone, the middle of the back, and the head are all in contact with the saber, right? So if you could see, when I go down, you see it's still touching my tailbone. What will happen is if you bend at the back, is it will leave, okay? So that's an easy way that you can kind of check yourself to see if you're in good position. Now, why do we want to accentuate that? Because this lean forward, we call hip flexion, is our number one power generating move, okay? That means even hitting a ball, jumping, running, any of this is all dependent on the core's activation and using the hip hinge. Using a jump is probably the easiest way to do it, right? Now, if we put Chinese terms to it, yin and yang, yang being positive, powerful, issuing, right? That's our lift. So if I'm going to jump, the first thing I do is do a lift, right? I go up, okay? When I land, I'm going to control my descent a little bit, so I go into a squat. So that looks like, okay? I'm, of course, not jumping too high because don't have much room to go. So again, lift down. You see how I'm going kind of down like this? If I go down straight like this, I don't have as much power, right? Because it's the movement of my torso which is giving me that upward lift. So I go down, I come up. And obviously, throwing your hands up will accentuate that swing up, which gives us that lift, right? When we land, we go down, okay? But also, do not omit the, don't go down just with your knees, okay? So this is important here. The upper torso must lean. There is a prohibition that is often stated out there of not leaning because it opens your head up and all of this other stuff. Just like with not letting the knee go beyond the toe, that is the wrong thing to be looking at. Your torso must lean. It must lean freely and it must be able to move through different positions accurately and quickly. As I said, your squat and that rhythm with the knee is going to be very, very important. In this particular case, your lift is what's happening, right? So I'm going back like this, and I'm pushing out that way. You know, the same thing happens, right, when I'm here. If I get down here, right, here, you see, I'm flexing at this hip. Okay, that's the thing, right? Being able to come down. This is why we do these things, right? Because we're not committing to either leg, right? Even if we're doing something like this, right? Really, really, really quick. We're not committing to either way. We can switch very, very, very quickly. If, however, we get down like this, we are now very rigid. We can't move, and right there. So we want to stay loose, kind of bouncy, right? And where that bounce is going to come is from your hip and from your ankle. The knee just goes along for the ride, right? So if I'm up here like this, and again, watch any sport, right? Tennis players do not sit here like this, right? They go like this, right? Because they don't know which way it's coming, okay? Same idea. If we're here like this and we're waiting to come in like that, keeping that footwork lively allows us to stay mobile, allows us to stay, ready to explode. And the reason we do is because we kind of get down into an athletic ready. We're kind of ready. We don't do this. This looks ridiculous, right? And give it a shot. It feels ridiculous too, right? It's not conducive to what it is because we want to get this hip flexion here and we keep it, right? Now, like Saber does not have the thrust, right? So we're not thrusting with anything in competition or in play, right? So that leaning reach is there, but still slashes out like that, coming through like that. The complaint, of course, is, oh, look how open your head is. Well, is it? I can move this Saber. This Saber is no further away from my head here than here. Right, the whole apparatus is moving together. It's sort of an illusion that way. So don't worry about it. I would rather have people err by leaning too far forward than not leaning back enough, right? Because staying here is a much better biomechanically sound place to be moving from, right? Now, accentuating that is, again, it's fairly simple, but a little counterintuitive. Let's use a kettlebell as our weight, but you can also, doing deadlifts at the gym with a straight bar, if you have a weight set, if you have all this kind of stuff, all that's great, right? Straight-legged deadlifts or Romanian deadlifts, if you want to call them that. All kinds of deadlifts, single-legged deadlifts. All of these deadlifts are wonderful for this sport and for sports like it because it's very, very leg intensive, very, very hip intensive, and everything gets strengthened that way. So I'll bring this here. So the first thing that we're going to do here with the kettlebell is a swing, right? This is just your bread and butter technique for this. And if you have kettlebells available to you and you've never used one before and you see, and there's some trainers or something, have somebody just show you a little bit about it, check your form, and then have at it, because these are wonderful tools. People really should look into keeping them in their arsenal. So we'll start here with just lifting it up off the ground with two hands, okay? That action is, of course, the lift. So if I put it down, you see that, okay? So I go down and I pick it up, okay? Now, I'm gonna get into what's called lockout position, where I got my hips forward, I'm leaning back just a little bit, and my knees are locked out. Yes, it is okay to have your knees locked out, okay? Now, from here, I push my hips back and then push them forward. And I get this to rise about chest level. All in the hips, right? You don't want any in the back. Okay. Pretty simple. Just focusing on that. You have both of your hands there. Do not have a towel. If you get a towel and you rope it through a kettlebell handle, you now have a good training tool which can tell you kind of if you're doing it right. Let me see if I can fudge this together with this. Let's hope this is strong enough to hold me. So I'm going to hold it here, hanging. Okay. Now, when I do a proper swing, you see, everything's in a straight line. You can't see. There we go. Try that again. Right? When you do it improperly, you'll see something like this. Right? Or it'll pop. I don't want to fling it up, but, or you'll see it go the other way, where it will kind of pop up, kind of kick up on you at the end. Those means you're putting too much arm in it. You're lifting with the arms. Again, the weight itself should be carrying your arms up, so all of this should be relaxed. The only thing it should be doing is keeping itself steady and not bending. Okay? All right. So, so for strengthening, those are the things that you want to think about, right? I didn't give a lot of specific exercises here because these are more principles that you want to bring to everything. Anything in your training. If you think about these principles in what you're doing, you know, in competition, then you're going to be able to take what you do in your fitness training and apply it well to what you're doing just in your sport. You'll become demystified for you, right? If you're looking to stay better on your feet, you kind of know what to do, what to check, that kind of thing. Just remember, your hips, everything is based on this, right? So your hips, when you're moving back and forth like this, when you're moving forward, you're trying to catch yourself with your hips, right? The other aspect of the lower body thing is the ankle. Make sure that your ankle is flexible enough, right? Now, if you have problems with valgus collapse, which is this, right? There's a couple of things that you can do. If you take a piece of furniture, I'll just demonstrate here without something there. I'll use my Saber. Well, imagine this is a piece of furniture that's not going to move, right? What you do is you take your foot here and pivot it on its heel. Put your big toe against that, whatever it's going, and then rotating on the heel, push against that piece of furniture or that, whatever it is you're using, right? So if you get that, that's going to start increasing the stability of the ankle as well in that plane of motion that way. What do we got for time? Okay, good. So there's that. Now, to make sure that you have enough ankle flexibility, stretches often don't work very well, simply because it's an artificial type of thing. Ankle mobility is very much more a joint mobility issue than a flexibility issue, meaning your body is trying to keep the ankle from moving into dangerous positions rather than being unable to move into positions that it's not flexible enough to hit. So doing squats, doing you know, deadlifts, jumps, right? Low lunges last week, doing those low stances, right? Getting that ankle to move and getting that rhythm. That's your first contact with the ground, right? With the earth, right? And that's where you're getting all of your power, right? So we want to make sure that that is very, very set. Okay, so there is that for the fitness aspect of it, of what I was going to go over today. Now, one thing as people are returning out there that I will address here is protection from COVID, protection, even just regular sanitary, protections, and because we've got a lot of gear, we've got a lot of stuff that's like that. One thing that everybody should be doing, and that we all advocate here, is wearing a mask at all times. So some people will say that it's, they can't breathe very well in it or whatever. But just so you know, I am an asthmatic ex-smoker who trains for a few hours at a time in this thing. I haven't had any problems. So definitely get those masks going. The nice thing about most of the face masks is that they actually work with fencing helmets rather well. And if you are in the market, if you have your own helmet, great. If you don't and you're looking for one, I recommend the absolute ones that have the removable liner in there, because they're much easier to clean. You can throw that in the wash and all that. But as you see here, so if I got my face mask on and I just come in straight to the helmet, everything is copacetic, right? I can, I've got that mask on, so I've still got the protection from spewing particles all over the place. It's going to help me keep my mask a little bit cleaner. Although now in post-pandemic times, most of the schools, and me included, are not loaning out gear much anymore because of the sanitary issues that way. Anyway, so yeah, so wear the mask, wash out the insides of your gear a lot, even though it's your own, right? Wipe it down, wash it off, all of that kind of thing, because you don't want to touch it and then touch something else, and all of that kind of thing. So that would be there. Also, wash your hands often. You can use, there's lots of different little things people can use. I've been using the Star Trek, space, the final frontier speech. That's about 20 seconds long. I think it's actually exactly 26 inches, seconds long. And if you can't get to a sink and everything like that, carry around some hand sanitizer, constantly be doing that, because washing your hands is the other part of this. Keeping the mask on is one thing, but if you touch your mask on the outside accidentally, you got to keep washing your hands so that you're not contaminating, all that kind of thing. If you do all of these things, right, you keep social distancing, you have your mask on, you can use your own gear, all of that. We've actually been able to safely and socially distance, do a lot of lightsaber fencing, and some HEMA style fencing as well. The sport does lend itself to a little bit of distance. So if you're following the rules, the FFE rules, core-to-core is illegal anyway, so we don't have to worry about that. But this is, all of this is a very good way to start getting back into it. If you are like most places who have, you know, been closed for a while and are kind of reopening and stuff like that, if you don't have people who have gear, the nice thing about lightsabers is that there's plenty of stuff that people can do without fighting somebody, and it still makes them feel like a hero, right? Who doesn't like holding a glowing sword like this and just, you know, going through stuff like that? All of that is going to be very, very uh, um, popular amongst people, especially kids and stuff like that. So these are good, very good ways to get involved, and get more and more people involved like that. All right, so we're kind of coming down here to the end. I have well, we have somebody trying to join here. Maybe we can get something going. But if we have any questions, otherwise, I'm probably. I think we lost our host, so hopefully I can disconnect everything all right. All right. Do we have any questions or comments or anything? Okay, server went down. We're waiting. All right. Nothing? Questions, comments, something to keep it going? Nothing yet. Oh, well. Okay. So, yeah, I guess basically all I'm saying is as we're getting back into this stuff, there's going to be a lot of experimentation. There's going to be a lot of, you know, new things that we can try, new things we're going to have to get used to. But the nice thing about it is we have a lot of resources available to us now. So we have you know, kettlebells and all kinds of stuff, and there's lots of materials out there on the internet. Check out Dr. Mark Chung for a lot of this stuff. K3 Combat Systems, they do fitness that's very, very specific to weapon combat and brought from it. So these are all great resources to dive into. So,
excellent,
and of course,
excellent.
yes,
Thank you,
let us
Chad.
know.
I mean, this is a great guideline for returning to practice as well as preventing injuries with a great workout. Much appreciated. And yeah, definitely looking forward to next week. And also, I've learned a lot today, especially the back axis, as well as how to maneuver carrying stuff around, as well as the general movements for the lightsaber.
Good.
Excellent. Thank you, Chad, and see you next week.
All right. Yes. Patience, practice, perseverance.